This video is about solar and lunar eclipses and how they happen. Keywords here are eclipse, penumbra and umbra. So, starting with a solar eclipse, if this is the moon and this is the sun, nothing's drawn to scale, but it just so happens that the moon is 400 times closer to the Earth than the sun is, but the sun is 400 times bigger. And what that basically means is that the moon, when you view from Earth, will just cover the sun at certain points if they happen to line up. So a solar eclipse is simply when the moon blocks the light from the sun from reaching a point on the Earth. So if you imagine this point here, we'll get the shadows are. So this point here will be perfectly dark, and that's known as the umbra. So if you're stood in that part of the Earth, this is the Earth, if you're stood in that part of the Earth and the moon blocks the sun, then this bit here will be a total eclipse of the sun. If we extend these lines that way and that way, these are areas of partial shadow, and they're called the penumbra. So if you stood in those parts, you will see a partial eclipse of the sun. So solar eclipse is when the sun is blocked by the moon and the shadow cast by the moon on the Earth causes the eclipse. So lunar eclipse, slightly different in that if we have the Earth here and the moon passing around the Earth on its orbit, if we imagine the light coming here from the sun in the distance, then the Earth will cast a shadow from the sun. And if so happens that the moon, so this will be the dark shadow area, remember the sun is a source of light, so there'll be a shadow cast. If the moon moves into this shadow area, then that will be an eclipse of the moon, or a lunar eclipse. So, solar eclipse, when the sun is blocked by the moon. A lunar eclipse is when the light from the sun is blocked by the Earth, causing a shadow, and the moon moves into that shadow, and that's an eclipse of the moon. Now, if you look at the video on the phases of the moon, you know that the moon goes around the Earth once every month approximately. So you'd expect that when the moon is here, you get an eclipse of the sun, and when the moon is here, you get an eclipse of the moon, or a lunar eclipse. So you get 2 eclipses a month. But actually, eclipses are much more rare, than that. There is a reason for that, and it's simply because of the relative angles of the Earth, Sun and the Moon. So if this is the Earth, and the Sun is over here somewhere, now the Earth moves in an orbit around the Sun in that plane, and if the Moon were to orbit at 90 degrees to that in the same plane, then we'd have these continual eclipses. But actually, the orbit of the moon is slightly inclined at about 5 degrees to the horizontal. Clearly, mine's more than 5 degrees. But so the moon isn't always in the Earth's shadow, and likewise, the sun isn't always directly in line with the moon. So it's the angle of the orbit of the moon which makes the eclipses much more rare than we'd think. As I said, if it was orbiting in the same plane, then we'd have 2 eclipses a month. But because it's at an angle, it means that it's much more rare that the Earth, Sun and the Moon all line up to make these eclipses. So the angle of the Moon is about 5 degrees from the horizontal plane of the orbit of the Earth around the Sun.